All right, today we're going to look at solving quadratics by factoring. Okay? Now, quadratic equation is like this right here. X squared minus 10x plus 16 equals 0. Where in this problem, the A is 1. There's a 1 right here. B would be negative 10, and C is 16. Okay? When you solve a quadratic equation by factoring, it must equal 0. It's got to equal 0. That's like the most important thing. It's got to equal 0. So if it does not equal 0, we have to make it equal 0. Okay? Now the reason for that is we have this thing called the zero property. There's zero product property, it should be. But anyway, when you have a number times 0, that equals 0. Or if you have 0 times a number, that equals 0 too. So if 0 is multiplied to anything, it's going to be 0. And we use this property right here to solve a quadratic equation like this. Because once I get this down into its factors, then I know one of these factors has to be 0. And that will give us our solutions for the equation. All right, well, let's look at one here. Here's some trinomials we're going to look at. And in these first ones, A equals 1 in every one of them. So like in this one here, this one we just looked at, let's factor this down. So we break down our 16 here. It's in descending order. 16 divided by 1 is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 16 divided by 3 is a decimal. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And I'm at 4 here, so that tells me I'm done. That's all the factors of 16. Now, since this is a plus right here, I need to add these and get 10. Okay? Which one of these add and get 10? Oh, right there, 2 and 8. So 2 and 8 are in my factors. So I've got x and 2. I've got x and 8. Get my signs in. This sign right here automatically goes to the big one every time. And the last sign, remember from before when we talked about this, the last sign, if the last sign is positive, they're both positive or they're both negative. If the last sign is negative, you have to have a positive and negative. Well, in this one, the last sign is a positive. All right, so they have to be the same. And since this one's already negative, this one has to be the same too. And so there's my factors of that trinomial. Well, this equals 0. So when I factor this, I get these two factors. Well, that equals 0. And so from the zero product property, if you have two things you multiply and equal 0, one of these must be 0. So that means right here, this must be 0. So since this must be 0, that means x would have to be positive 2. So basically, we're just doing the positive 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. Right here, x would have to equal 8. 8 minus 8 is 0. And basically, it's just the opposite of what this number is here. And since that's negative 8, this would be positive 8. And these are my solutions for this trinomial. Okay, now, you should be able to plug them in and check it afterwards. All right, so we'll do that real quick. I'm going to put 2 in. So if I put 2 in, 2 squared, all right, minus 10 times 2, and then plus 16, and what do I get? I get a big fat 0. So this one checks out right. Let's check out the 8. 8 squared minus 10 times 8 plus 16. And look at that, I get a 0 there too. So both of these check out right, so they're good. So my answers are right. 2 and 8 are my solutions. All right, let's go to this next one. Here's another one here. We want to factor this. Well, 48 is my C number. I break it down. 48 divided by 1 is 48. 48 divided by 2 is 24. 48 divided by 3 is 16. 48 divided by 4 is 12. 48 divided by 5 is a decimal, so I skip it. 48 divided by 6 is 8. 48 divided by 7 is a decimal, so I skip it. And 8's over there, so that tells me I'm done. All right, so there's all the factors of 48. Now, since this is a minus in front of that 48, that means I have to subtract. I have to subtract these numbers, and I've got to get 13. Okay, so which one's subtracting get 13? I believe right here, 3 and 16. 16 minus 3 is 13. So there's my numbers that go in the factors. So I got an x and a 3, x and a 16. Okay. And then this right here goes to the big one automatically. And then my last sign, now again now, my last sign, if it's a positive, they're the same. If it's a negative, they're opposites. Well, the last sign's a negative, which means they're opposites. Okay, so since that's a minus already, this has to be opposite of plus. And there's my factors. Okay, so I factored my trinomial. Well, it equals 0. Okay, so that means these factors are multiplied and it equals 0. That means one of these factors must be 0. Well, if this factor is 0 right here, that means x would have to equal -3. And if this factor is going to be 0, that means x would have to be 16. And there's my two solutions. And if I was to put these in, it should work out. Let's try them and see, okay? I'm going to put -3 in. All right, so you got to put that in parentheses now. -3 squared minus 13 times -3, and then minus 48, and I get a big whopping 0. I'm going to do this time. I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to replace my -3 with a positive 16. Little shortcut this time. And there you go. I put 16 in. Now what do I get? Big fat 0. So both of these are correct. All right, what about this third one here? Let's factor it. All right, 24 is my C number. It's in descending order, which it needs to be descending order. 24 divided by 1 is 24. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 24 divided by 4 is 6. 24 divided by 5 is a decimal, so I skip it. And then 6 is next. So there's all my factors of 24. Okay, now in this problem, since this is a minus here for that 24, I have to subtract them. And I should get 5. Which one's subtract and get 5? Well, right there, 3 and 8. So there's my numbers that go in the factors. So it's going to be x and 3, x and 8. Now I put my signs in. Well, this sign right here goes to the big one automatically. And then my last sign, again now, the last sign, if it's a positive, they're both the same. If it's a negative, they're opposites. And my last sign's a negative, so these have to be opposites. So that's already a plus. This has to be the opposite. It has to be a minus. Okay, and there's my factors for that trinomial. Well, this trinomial equals 0, so that means these two factors have to equal 0. And if I have two things I'm multiplying and it equals 0, one of these two things has to be 0. Well, if this one's 0, that means x would be 3. And if that's 0, x would be -8. And there's my two solutions. Okay, now I'm not going to check these this time. I'm just going to go into the next one. Now in this one, notice we got x squared plus 7x. This is quadratic because we have x squared, but it equals 60. It does not equal 0. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get rid of the 60 by subtracting it off. And that'll make it equal 0 now. Now what do I have over here? Let's put in descending order. I got x squared plus 7x minus 60 equals 0, and there you go. I'm ready to go. So my C is 60. I break it down. 60 divided by 1, 60 divided by 2, 60 divided by 3, 60 divided by 4 is 15, 60 divided by 5 is 12, 60 divided by 6 is 10, 60 divided by 7 is a decimal, 8's a decimal, 9's a decimal, and then 10's over there. So that's it. Those are all the factors of 60. All right, well, since it's a minus for that 60, I need to subtract them. And I'm supposed to get 7. See, I got to subtract and get 7. Which ones subtract and get 7, right? 5 and 12. 5 and 12 go in my factor. So I've got x and 5, x and 12. This sign goes to the big one. And my last sign is a minus. And remember now, if your last sign's a minus, they have to be opposites. So I've already got a plus here. That means this has to be a minus there. And there's my factors for this trinomial. Well, it equals 0. So that means this will have to equal 0. Okay, so my two factors are multiplied. It equals 0. That means one of these must be 0. Well, if this one's 0, x would be 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. If this one's 0, x would have to be -12. I didn't mean to write parentheses there. -12 plus 12 is 0. And there's my two solutions. I could plug them in and it should work. I'm going to do this one to make sure here. So let's put 5 in first and check it. So 5 squared plus 7 times 5 equals 60. Equals 60. There you go. Now if I put negative 12 in, it should work. So now I got to put that in parentheses. Negative 12 squared plus 7 times negative 12 equals 60. It equals 60. So both of them work. They're both good. All right. Here's another one. It does not equal 0. So you see it equals 16x minus 28. So I'm going to have to minus 16x, which makes this go away. I'm going to have to add 28 to both sides, which makes that go away, and now it equals 0. So this all goes away and equals 0. Now over here, put my stuff in a descending order. So x squared minus 16x and then plus 28 equals 0. And there you go. There's my trinomial equals 0. And you got to do that every time. It's got to equal 0 every time. And now my 28 is my c. 28 divided by 1, 28 divided by 2, 28 divided by 3 is decimal. 28 divided by 4 is 7. 5 is decimal, 6 is decimal, 7's over there. So there's all my possibilities. Which ones add? I've got to add them and get 16. Well, 2 and 14. So that means I've got x and 2, x and 14. This goes to the big one. And this last sign on this one now is a plus, which now if it's a plus, that means they're both positive or they're both negative. Well, this one's a negative, so they must be both negative. Well, those two factors equal 0. And so now since I have these factors here, they're multiplied and equal 0, one of these must be 0. So here, x would be 2, and here, x would be 14. And there's my solutions. Okay. Now let me put this one in. Let's do 2 first. So 2 squared over here, 2 squared would be 4. So I get 4 on this side. I'm going to write it right there. Okay. Now if I put 2 over here, 16 times 2 minus 28, and I get 4. See, I get 4 on both sides, so that tells me 2 is right. Let's do the same thing for the 14. Let's put the 14 in. So 14 squared on this side, 196. All right, so I'm just going to put 196 right here now. Now if I put 14 on this side, all right, 16 times 14 minus 28, and sorry, I didn't notice I did a mistake there. 16 times 14, didn't hit my parentheses there. Minus 28, 196. I got the same thing on both sides, so that tells me both of these are true answers. Okay, and then one last one here of the a equals 1 type. See, it equals all this stuff. It does not equal 0, so I'm going to have to minus 4x on both sides. That'll go away. I had to minus 36 on both sides, so that'll go away, and that equals 0. Okay, over here, let's put our terms together. These go together, and let's see, I'm going to have x squared, and 20 minus 4 would be a plus 16x, and then I got a minus 36, and that equals 0, and there you go. So I do the same routine. My c is 36. 36 divided by 1, 36 divided by 2, 36 divided by 3, 36 divided by 4, 36 divided by 5 is a decimal, 36 divided by 6 is 6, and there you go, I'm to a number on this side. So there's all my possibilities. Now which one, since this is a minus, I got to subtract them, and I should get 16. Which one subtract and get 16 right there? 2 and 18. So this is x and 2, x and 18 equals 0. This sign always goes to the big one, so the 18 here's plus. My last sign being a minus. All right, last sign's a minus. That means I have to have a positive and a negative. So I've already got a positive, so that means right here this is negative. And there you go, there's my factors. It equals 0, so one of these must be 0. So right here, x would be 2. Right there, x would be negative 18. And there's my 2 solutions. All right, I'm not going to check this one this time. Let's move on. Now, what about trinomials where a does not equal 1? Like in this one here. Now, look, it already equals 0. It has to equal 0 every time, whether the a is 1 or not. Now, when you have an 8 that's not 1, remember you got to take your 12 here and you got to multiply it times 3, which is 36. So 36 divided by 1 is 36, 36 divided by 2 is 18, 36 divided by 3 is 12, 36 divided by 4 is 9, 36 divided by 5 is a decimal, 36 divided by 6 is 6, and there you go, that's all of it. We just did that a minute ago, didn't we? Last problem, yeah. All right, now, I got a minus in front of that, which means I got to subtract. I got to subtract and get 16. Well, it's the same thing we had last problem. Had a 16, so it's 2 and 18. All right, so that means I have an x and a 2. I have an x and an 18. All right, let's get my signs in. This goes here, and the last sign being a minus. Okay, the last sign being a minus tells you have to have a positive and a negative. So I've got a positive. That means this is negative. Okay, but because of this 12 in front now, I've got to divide both of these by 12. Okay, well, now these factors, that equals 0 here, okay? So can't forget that equals 0. Now I need to simplify these. All right, so it's 2/12 simplifies to 1/6. Right here, 18/12 simplifies to 3/2. Okay, now here's where factoring, usually on factoring, we would take this 6, because we can't have fractions in factors, we would take the 6 and put it over in front of the x. So which gives us 6x minus, and then the top numbers will 1. And then here this 2 would go over in front of that x, which gives me 2x, and then plus, and then top number 3. And so that gives me these factors here. And it still equals 0. Okay, but here's the thing. When I'm right here, I can quit right there. I don't necessarily have to take it to this. Because what I can do here, since x minus 1/6, if that's a 0 there, then x would just be a positive 1/6. There's one solution. And then right here, see, x plus 3/2, that means x would have to be negative 3/2. And there you go. Now, if you do have your factors, it's just real simple. Since this is 6x minus 1, it's going to be a positive 1 over 6. This is going to be a negative, since it's positive 3, it's going to be negative 3 over 2. And those are my solutions. Okay, now I'm running into this problem down here, but let's check them. So if I put 1/6 in, all right, I'm going to check it here. All right, clear off my screen. So I've got 12, in parentheses, I'm going to do 1/6, just 1 divided by 6, in parentheses, squared, plus 16, and in parentheses, 1 divided by 6, which is 1/6, and minus 3, and it should equal 0. Does it? Yes, it does. All right. Now, what about negative 3/2? All right, let's do it. So let's do 12, in parentheses, negative 3 divided by 2, negative 3/2, squared, and then plus 16, and then in parentheses, negative 3 divided by 2, negative 3/2, and then minus 3. And it should equal 0. Is it going to? Why, yeah, it does. So both of these are right. Okay. Now, let's go to this one here. What about this one? Notice, first thing, it does not equal 0, so I'm going to have to subtract 5 on both sides. That's going to give me 9x squared minus 12x, subtract 5 equals 0, and now I'm ready to do it. So again, we got an a number, so I got to do 9 times 5, which is 45. So 45 divided by 1 is 45, 45 divided by 2 is decimal, 45 divided by 3 is 15, 45 divided by 4 is a decimal, 45 divided by 5 is 9, 45 divided by 6 is a decimal, 45 divided by 7 is a decimal, divided by 8 is a decimal, then 9's over there. So there's all my possibilities. Okay, now since there's a minus in front of that, I need to subtract. I gotta subtract these and get 12. Do you see it? Right there, 3 and 15. Okay, so I'm gonna bring in another paper here because I'm running out of room. Okay. All right. So 3 and 15 are my factors. So I've got x and a 3, x and a 15. Okay. This goes to the big one here, so that's going to go there. And the last sign's a minus, and again, the last sign being a minus, we have to have a positive and a negative. So I got a negative right there, so there's a positive. Okay? But because there's 9 in front, I got to divide both these by 9. And these two factors equal 0. All right, and now simplify these down. So right here, x plus, this simplifies 1/3. Right here, x minus, and that simplifies 5/3. Okay? And then you can just tell your answer there. You don't have to completely factor it out now. You can just say right here, x equals -1/3. And right there, x equals +5/3. And there's my solutions. Okay? Now, if you did completely factor it out, see, this 3 would have to go in front of the x. All right, so there's this factor, and then this 3 on this one would have to go over in front of the x, which gives me 3x minus 5 equals 0. And there's my true factors right there. These are not really my factors right there, but we can just simplify and go right into my solutions from right there, see? But if you have your factors right here, then it's going to be -1/3. Right here be +5/3. And there's my solutions. Either way, I get the same solutions, but it's quicker just once you right here, you just go right into your solutions. All right, there's one more like that. Okay, now look, this one, oh my goodness. We've got this whole quadratic equals that whole quadratic. Well, to solve, we got to have equals 0. So right here, I'm going to add 2x squared on both sides, and then make that go away. Well, I'm going to have to subtract 4x on both sides, and then make that go away. I'm going to -7 on both sides, and make that go away. And now on this side, I have an all big old 0. Now what do I have here? Well, if I add them together, it's a 6x squared. Right there, those would be -7x, and right there, -12, and there you go. So every time it's got to equal 0. And so if you have stuff over here that where it doesn't equal 0, you got to get rid of it, move it over here so it equals 0. And now I can go forward in factors. Like 6 times 12 is 72. Okay, 72 divided by 1 is 72. Divided by 2 is 36. Divided by 3 is 24. Divided by 4 is 18. Divided by 5 is a decimal. Divided by 6 is 12. Divided by 7 is decimal. Divided by 8 is 9. And then 9 is next, so I'm done. Okay, now which ones, since it's a minus, they got to subtract and get -7. They got to get 7. I don't think this one works, man. I don't think it works. I picked out a problem that was prime. Sure did. I picked out a prime one. So this is prime, which means we're going to have to do this a different way. Factoring won't work here, so that happens sometimes. And we'll get into quadratic formula with that later. Okay? All right, now, then we have binomials. Now, binomials are trinomials where you have like a c missing, like this one right here. See, there's no c part, just have x squared minus 5x and there's no number. Or you have a b missing, like right here, there's x squared, but there's no x term. -9 equals 0. Okay? Now, first let's look at those that have no c. If you have no c, like this right here, x squared minus 5x. What I notice on this, now of course it's got equal 0. What I notice is both of these terms have x. So what I can do is I can factor x out of those two terms. Now if I take x out of this term, that leaves me an x. Then I have this minus. Now if I take x out of that term, that just leaves me a 5. So I have x times x minus 5 equals 0. And so essentially, I've got two factors here that equal 0. So like right here, what would x be if this was 0? Well, x would have to be 0 there. And right here, x would have to be 5 there. And there's my solutions, 0 and 5. If I put 0 in, 0 squared is 0. 5 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 0 is 0. So that works. If I put 5 in, 5 squared is 25. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 minus 25 is 0. They both work. Okay, here's another one like that. Okay. See, both of these have an x. See, I got x squared plus 8x equals 0. I have no c number. All right, well, since both these have an x, I can factor it out. If I take the x out of here, it drops it down to x plus, and if I take the x out of that term, it drops it down to an 8. And so there's my factor now. So I've got two factors here. One of these has to be 0. Since I multiply them and it gets 0, one of them's got to be 0. So right here for this one, x would have to be 0. Right here for that one, x would have to be negative 8. And there's my two solutions. Okay? Now I can check those again. If I put 0 in, 0 squared is 0, 8 times 0 is 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. So this one's good. If I put negative 8 in, negative 8 squared is 64. 8 times negative 8 is negative 64. So I have 64 plus negative 64, which is 0, and it works too. Okay? Now, on this one here, x squared minus 11x equals 0. All right, they both have an x, so I can factor an x out, which leaves me this right here. Okay? And now one of these two factors has to be 0. So right here, x would be 0, and right there, x would be 11. And there's my two solutions. Okay? All right. Now, sometimes it does not equal 0. So like right here, I'd have to minus 15x. And that gives me x squared minus 15x equals 0. It's got to equal 0. And now I can do the factoring. Factor out the x. And there you go. I've got two factors equal 0. So right here, x would be 0. Right there, x would be 15. Okay, what about this one? Same thing. I'm going to have to add 8x to both sides to make it equal 0. That'd be a 0. Okay, I'm running out of room. I'll come over here. So see how both these have an x? I can factor an x out, which would give me this. Okay, so I factor x out of both of those. I would have this. So here's these factors. They multiply and get 0. So it means one of these is 0. So if this is 0, x would be 0. And if this one's 0, x would be negative 8. And there's my two solutions there. Okay. Now, sometimes you have a binomial where you have no b. Okay? Like this right here. Now, this is x squared minus 9x. So basically, this is x squared plus 0x. So basically, my 9 here is my c. And if I break my 9 down, 1 times 9, 3 times 3. Which numbers subtract and get 0? Right there, 3 and 3. So this is x and 3, x and 3. And there's no b sign, so you don't have the big one. Of course, neither one of them is a big one. But here's the thing, the last sign's a negative. And if you remember now, the last sign being a negative tells you that you have to have a positive and negative. So one of these is positive, and one of them is negative. And it equals 0. So right here, x would equal negative 3, and right there, x would equal positive 3. Okay? But again, there's no b term, so that means it's 0. So I need to subtract these and get 0. Same thing here. See, I got x squared minus 16. So my 16 times 1, 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Which ones subtract and get 0? Right there, 4 and 4. So this is x plus 4. This is x minus 4. Equals 0. This is what you call a difference of squares. See, we got a difference here, and this is x squared, and this is 4 squared. So if you notice that, it's a difference of squares. It's just x plus 4 and x minus 4. That's how it breaks down. So right here, x would equal negative 4. X would equal positive 4. Okay? Now, there's another way you could do that with the square root property. I like doing the square root property better, actually. X squared minus 9 equals 0. If I add 9 to both sides, and I get x squared equals 9. We actually have done this before. And then I can square root both sides. So the square root would cancel the square, have x equals, the square root of 9 is 3. But when I square root both sides, it could be positive or it could be negative. So plus or minus 3. Positive 3 and negative 3. Okay. Two more here. x squared equals 25. Again, I could square root both sides. The square root cancels the square, so x equals the square root of 25, which is 5, but it could be plus or minus. So positive or negative 5. Same thing here. If I square root both sides here, the square root cancels the square, so x equals the square root of 49 is 7, but it could be plus or minus. So there'd be my solutions. Okay? Now, back up on this. If I take my x squared equals 25, and let's do it by factoring again. If you'd rather do it by factoring, that's fine. But it's got to equal 0, so I got a minus 25 on both sides. So x squared minus 25 equals 0. And I need two numbers that multiply up to 25. And if I subtract them, I get 0. That's 5 and 5. So this is going to be x plus 5, x minus 5 equals 0. And right here, x would equal negative 5. Right there, x would equal positive 5. And there's my solutions, which is what we had here. So this is maybe a little simpler doing it that way. Okay? But anyway, this is how you solve quadratic functions, quadratic equations by factoring. Okay, if you have any questions, you need to get a hold of me, just contact me anytime, all right? Have a good rest of the day.